Next up, we have Zodiac. Released March 2nd in 2007, written by James Vanderbilt. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Robert Downey Jr., Mark Ruffalo, and Anthony Edwards. The film grossed $84 million worldwide on a budget of $65 million. Ciphers and clues are sent to local newspapers by a mysterious serial killer who calls himself the Zodiac Killer. Robert Graysmith, a San Francisco cartoonist, is unable to resist the hunt and obsessively tracks his case, trying to bring him to justice.
Yeah, and this film was also based off the book by Robert Graysmith. And I think that's one of the most intriguing parts of Zodiac is that it's a true story. And even more intriguing, it was never solved. The Zodiac Killer was never caught. And it's just a fascinating story, the things that he did and how he got away with everything. And I absolutely adore this film, despite it being almost 3 hours long. I still feel like I've seen it a dozen times.
Yeah.
And it's got, of course, the dark tones that Fincher loves to work with and intense scenes that we expect from Fincher. But at times, this can be a very light and fun film. And it almost seems like there are, 2 or 3 or 4 movies all mashed together into this one like monster movie of an investigation. We get timelines and storylines of basically the killings as well as the 3 different characters who are kind of like working together at times and also like passing the investigation off kind of like in a relay race. And we follow each character and characters if they're working together on these timelines. And it's a police procedural, but it avoids cliches. There are no shootouts. There are no, doors being kicked in.
No car chases.
Yeah, no standoffs. It's all dialogue mostly.
Yeah, and like you said, this is a true story. And obviously, we weren't alive when this happened, but at the time, the Zodiac was a gigantic story in American media. And
for years.
Especially in San Francisco, because people who lived in San Francisco were fearful of being victims of the Zodiac. And the Zodiac case actually changed the way policing is done in America, because one of the reasons why the investigation took so long and found so many dead ends was because the crimes took place in different counties. And because of this, back then, different police institutions, they were not working and collaborating together. They all held their own private investigations for cases, and they never shared details or worked together. And because of this, the people investigating the crimes, they were missing out on key details and important pieces of evidence from other killings and other jurisdictions that they were never given or provided. And so this is what stalled all of these investigations. And then after the Zodiac case, it was implemented into American society that police offices and agencies had to begin working together in collaboration when crimes went past jurisdictions. And so this case brought that about.
Yeah, that's just actually like intelligence agencies, how they wouldn't work together pre 9/11, but now post 9/11, once all, the NSA and the FBI and the TSA had all this information that they could have been helping each other with, and then that's helped contribute to what happened, and now they actually all do work together, and that's, I'm sure that's exactly what happened, but more on like a state police level and local police level.
Yeah, and then I think the strength of this movie is that Fincher makes you feel like you're investigating this crime, and just like in real life, the investigation took decades, and obviously they never found who the real Zodiac was, so there was no closure to the crimes itself. And just like this film, you feel the same thing as an audience member. It's a slowly paced film on purpose because Fincher wants you to feel like it was like what it was like to investigate this and what the characters were going through and experiencing over these years and years and years of slowly gathering evidence and finding dead end after dead end. And also, just like in real life, this film ends without closure in a way.
And this movie reminds me a lot of All the President's Men, which is one of my favorite political thrillers, and it's about the journalist Woodward Bernstein who uncovered Watergate, the Nixon scandal. But, instead of 2 journalists, we get a cop, a journalist, and a cartoonist on the case. And the characters in this film are sensational. And this is one of Robert Downey Jr.'s biggest roles since his release from prison while he was trying to, restart his illustrious career. And this was right before he got cast as Iron Man. And I'm sure it was it was a major factor in Marvel letting Jon Favreau cast him as Tony Stark because, you see a lot of similarities between Paul Avery and Tony Stark, which I think it all stems just from Robert Downey Jr., who's absolutely phenomenal in this film. And, you see that they have like the same goatee almost, and they've the arrogance and charisma, and of course that's all just Downey being Downey.
And the film he made before this was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Shane Black, who ended up making Iron Man 3. And that was actually his first major role after being released from prison. And also he has the same characteristics, and you can see the potential of him being Tony Stark in Kiss Bang Bang and Zodiac. And so obviously those two films were weighed heavily upon Jon Favreau casting him.
And Jake Gyllenhaal is awesome as Robert Graysmith. He's a very like quiet, intelligent cartoonist, kind of like an Eagle Scout grown up. And, you know, on paper, it probably seemed kind of like a boring role, but I think Jake knocked it out of the park with his relatability and daring nature in this film, because Jake's one of the greatest actors of his generation, hands down, despite, you know, never winning an Oscar or anything like that. But he provides like a youthful, energetic pulse for this film, and it's his obsession and fascination, which is a main theme of this film, obsession, that lets the audience and maintains the audience's obsession with the story as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point of the movie, is that it's not an exact, perfectly accurate depiction of the events. This film is based upon Graysmith's book, and Graysmith himself became obsessive over the investigation and obsessive over discovering who Zodiac was. And so, in several regards, Graysmith was biased in certain ways, and so we see that biased nature in the storytelling of this movie, because it's being told in Graysmith's point of view for the most part.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is also brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your comfort, obsesses over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped has been awesome. They sent us their performance packages. Their rep Kyle has been great. They're sending us even more stuff coming this week. We'll let you know what it is when it shows up. I'm pretty excited to get it.
It's a great product and a great brand. Check them out.
Yeah, we have their luxury lawnmower groomer, which is the greatest clippers I've ever used in my life. I don't know what I've been doing using these things at CVS that cost $12. My life has changed. Yo, it has a light and it's waterproof. You can trim in the shower and everything. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. And everybody, grooming is a necessary part of life. The holidays are coming up. Whether you're a guy, a girl, whatever, if you need a gift for somebody, if you have men in your life, brothers, siblings, cousins, a father, aunts, uncles, whatever, I highly suggest getting them something from Manscaped. This is easily my favorite Mark Ruffalo role as Inspector David Toshi, who's basically a good cop who's been dealt this shitty hand of a virtually impossible to solve case. And Toshi was actually famous in real life at the time. He tutored Steve McQueen for Bullet and was a role model for the character in Dirty Harry for Clint Eastwood.
Wow, he must have been a badass.
Yeah, so he's probably a pretty cool guy. But he did wear those bow ties and everything. And Ruffalo plays him, and not really as a hotshot officer, but more in the sense of doing things by the book because he really believes in that. And all three of these characters act as surrogates of this investigation and this journey that the audience takes in the path of trying to capture and find out who Zodiac is. And that's the thing that they all have in common is their failure, really. I mean, although you could argue that Robert is the one played by Jake who does, spoiler alerts, kind of solve the case at the end, you could think, and maybe Graysmith thinks he solved it himself too. But still, no one is brought to justice. The crime is still open. No one was ever arrested. And it's really only this newspaper cartoonist who's stubborn enough and to keep tunneling away at this journey and to try to build the most convincing case against somebody to make them guilty.
Yeah, and eventually it ends with him suspecting Arthur Lee Allen as the culprit of Zodiac, and it's obviously never proven, but both he and many of the officers investigating the case, they had him as their favorite suspect, but they never could prove it. But also, like you said, they all fail, and that's an important aspect of the story because these three characters, they go through very drastic transformations throughout the film because the investigation itself takes so long and takes so much out of them, and they all change. So, for example, Paul Avery begins as a successful, charismatic journalist who begins helping investigate this, and then he ends the film as an alcoholic recluse. And then Toshi goes from a pretty obsessive detective who's bent on finding the Zodiac for several years, and then by the second half of the film, when Graysmith starts talking to him about it, he honestly doesn't even care about Zodiac anymore. He ends up understanding that Zodiac is just a small thing in the big picture because Zodiac stopped calling, Zodiac stopped killing people, and even though Zodiac was a serial killer, he only killed a handful of people, and Toshi even says the line, do you have any idea how many people are murdered every year in San Francisco? It's hundreds. And so Zodiac isn't as big of a problem as the public maybe thought it was. And then Graysmith himself goes from a curious observer to a completely obsessed investigator of the Zodiac. And all three of these characters go through this transformation because the investigation itself is pretty much impossible to solve.
Yeah, and yes, like you said, Zodiac only killed a handful of people compared to the amount of people who are killed every year, just in a city like San Francisco. But it's really a battle with the media and in the perception with the public that makes Zodiac such a big story and makes all these people obsess over it. And the most fascinating thing about this story and the Zodiac Killer is that all these clues and pieces of evidence
the codes
that the killer supplied to authorities and newspapers. And the Zodiac Killer was, of course, he was clearly arrogant. He's very intelligent, but he's also very needy. He needs attention. He wants to be admired, just like a lot of serial killers. He wanted his work to be broadcast on every newspaper, every radio show, every newspaper. He also wanted to laugh in everybody's face. That's why he's sending pieces of evidence and letters into everything. And, killing wasn't enough for him. He needed to gloat about it in front of everybody in the world, knowing that no one could solve the case.
Yeah, exactly. And David Fincher films the killings in a really disturbing way. So these are some of the most disturbing killings you'll see.
It's like he kills people. That's how Fincher does it.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
that well.
And especially the murder in the park when he ties up that young couple and he starts stabbing them in the back, and Fincher doesn't cut away. He just holds the camera right there, and you just see the knife going in and out of their bodies. And I had never seen a stabbing filmed like that before. Usually it's a lot of quick cuts and different angles and shots cut together, but he just has a static camera and you just see the stabbing over and over again. And that was the first time I saw that. And even every time I see this, it's a very disturbing moment in an image. And I think that Fincher found a unique way to capture the murders.
Yeah, and in terms of capturing, we talked about earlier that this was the first movie that Fincher switched completely, and now his entire professional career since then has been digital cameras and digital format. And Zodiac was captured with Thomson's Viper Filmstream high-definition video cameras, which were the first HD cameras that could somewhat match the quality of film. And although I prefer film over digital, this film's beautifully shot. He got very creative with it in terms of these beautiful landscape shots and like helicopter angles and helicopter shots. There's that great shot of the skyline of the city with all the lights lit up in the fireworks show in the 4th of July.
Most of the city shots in this movie are all CGI.
Yeah, and also
completely CGI.
I love the shot in the beginning with like the sky view of the cab. Just follow. It's like a drone following a cab perfectly, but obviously that's CGI too.
Mm-hmm. And then I thought it was really smart the way he set it up, because usually if a movie takes place in San Francisco, you always see the Golden Gate Bridge in the opening of the movie. Like, oh, Golden Gate Bridge, we're in San Francisco. But instead, Fincher didn't even show the Golden Gate Bridge. And instead, in the opening, he had a shot of a helicopter push-in of the bay of San Francisco, and he digitally altered the landscape to perfectly match how the city looked in that time period. And then begins probably I think my favorite opening credit sequences in all of Fincher's movies is the POV shot of the first Zodiac letter being delivered to the San Francisco Chronicle, and how it goes through different hands and it's brought from outside by the postal worker and brought through the building and carried through the office and then eventually lands on the editor's secretary's desk. I think it's my favorite opening credits.
And comparatively to Seven, where we talked about how it's a film about murders, serial killer murders, but you never see the actual killing, you just see the end result of the killings. Zodiac he shows the killings. Also, sometimes you see the end results, but he shows what he would obviously dramatize as the killing. So again, it's the realistic, factual serial killer story versus the fictional one.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think he probably did it to set it apart from Seven.
And also, this scene has, I think, one of the scariest scenes I've seen in a long time is when Graysmith goes to visit Vaughn in the third act of the film, and Vaughn apparently knew Rick Marshall, who is at the moment Grace Smith's number one suspect, and he's trying to find movie posters that he thinks Rick Marshall made because the handwriting from that movie poster matched the Zodiac's. And there's this amazing scene, and Vaughn reveals that he is the one who actually made the movie posters. And then Grace Smith is terrified, and then there's that scene where Vaughn leads him into the basement, and they're just both in the basement, and Grace Smith is just like, what am I doing here? And then he hears footsteps on the floor above. And it's one of the most tense scenes I've ever seen.
That's one of the most terrified I've been in a movie.
And nothing violent happens.
Horribly
That's how
terrified.
good of a director he is.
Yeah, that's a master of suspense, and
Not many people have basements in California.
yeah, master of suspense and dread. That's an intense scene.
And also, Fincher places subtle hints about who could be the Zodiac. For example, in Vaughn has the basement, and there's a phone in the basement that you see for a moment, and it could be like who has a phone in their basement, especially back then, and it could be is that the phone that the Zodiac uses to call the police?
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our friends at movieposters.com. Use coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today. Movieposters.com is the best site to get your movie posters. It has been for years. They've been great to work with. Thanks so much to David for hooking it up with our posters. They also sponsor our giveaway contest, which we do every month. They offer great options for original designs, framing, backlight, canvas, and even plaque designs. Use coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today at movieposters.com.
And then that great scene with Arthur Lee Allen where the police are questioning him and they don't have any concrete evidence. It's all circumstantial, but the way that Arthur behaves, it's so strange, and it's just like got red flags all over it. Like the way he crosses his legs, his watch is a Zodiac watch.
His knowledge, the knife in his trunk,
Yeah,
and the things he knows about the cases.
Yeah, and he says the blood in my trunk was from a chicken I killed or something, and it's like
In his apartment. His trailer.
Yeah, and he's a very strange and bizarre person who seems to be like a perfect candidate. They wrote it this way and filmed it this way to allude to the fact that they created suspicious behavior to make us feel suspicious of this character and make us feel just as disoriented as the police, where this guy seems like the perfect suspect, but we have no evidence on him.
Yeah, and John Carroll Lynch plays Arthur Lee Allen, and he's so good in this movie.
He's a great character actor.
Yeah, and he's chilling. I think it's an underrated performance because there's so many top-billed actors in this movie.
Yeah.
And there's that great line where he's like, "I'm not the Zodiac, and if I was, I wouldn't tell you."
I certainly wouldn't tell you.
And also his watch, too, the symbol, it's a Zodiac watch, which is the symbol of the Zodiac. So Arthur Lee Allen, Lee, is clearly the number one suspect for the entire movie, really, for the audience and for Robert Graysmith and for all the cops. And at the end of the film, it's Lee who Graysmith goes to see, because Graysmith, I'm sure he did this in real life, and he thinks that he solved the case. And for him, that's his whole obsession, is he just has to know. He can't explain why he has to know, but he just has to find out who it is and who did all this. And that's that scene representing where he walks up to Lee Allen while he's just working at that hardware store, and he just looks at him. He just stares at him.
Yeah.
Doesn't say a word.
He just slightly nods, too.
And you know Lee knows that's why he's there.
Also, at the very end of the film, the surviving victim of that San Francisco shooting positively identifies Arthur Lee Allen from a photo. And that's the end of the film. And so what happened right after that was Arthur Lee Allen died, I think, of a heart attack. So they're never able to continue the investigation into him or question him again because he died.
But it's strongly insinuated that he's the one who did it.
Yeah. And again, that's because the film is told through the perspective of Graysmith, who wrote the book, and he alludes to the idea that Allen is the Zodiac.
I'm sure there's a book that disproves a lot of the things he wrote. So it's just a great film, and it's a great story, and it's not what happened, but the fascinating nature of what happened.
Yeah, I love this movie. It's a fantastic depiction of obsession and mystery. And if you haven't seen it, I think it's on Netflix. You got to check it out. It's a long movie, but it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's a borderline masterpiece. And you know what? I know some people don't like long movies, and probably some people think it's slow and boring, but this is a phenomenal film. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just always love seeing actors like Ruffalo and Downey when they're not in superhero costumes.
Yeah, and it's a masterclass in directing, hands down.
Mm-hmm.